Time's expired. I'd like to, if I may, just quickly follow up on a point that Ms. Jacobs made on the use of military force. You know, this committee is charged with that responsibility, and we take that very seriously. I understand you're using Article 2 self-defense when it comes to our troops being under fire and attack, and I get that. If the administration were to respond either preemptively to the IRGC or to Hezbollah or to Hamas, do you believe that you would have to come before this committee for that authorization?
If we were responding to an attack in self-defense, then we would rely on the president's Article 2 authority. If we were taking action that would elevate to war in the constitutional sense, we would consult with Congress and seek authorization for the use of military force.
If, say, hypothetically, Hezbollah launched 100,000 rockets into Israel and we wanted to respond, I would argue you do not have authorization to hit Hamas.
I would agree with you, Jim.
And same with, not Hamas, I mean Hezbollah. And probably the same with Hamas in that situation.
If the United States, if President Biden wanted to work with Israel to respond, should Hezbollah decide to launch that amount of rockets into Israel, we would certainly come consult with Congress.
Thank you. And I think we're all in agreement on that. So thank you very much. Chair now recognizes Ms. Salazar.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Assistant Secretary Barbara Leaf, for your service, and Mrs. Dana Stroll for being here and answering our questions. You know, I represent the city of Miami, the chairman of the subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere, and I have a few questions to you about Colombia and Cuba. This picture over here shows the Cuban ambassador to Lebanon. His name is Jorge Leon Cruz, meeting with Ahmed Abdel Hadid, who is the Hamas representative in Lebanon, and with Abdul Hamed, who is the head of political and media relations for Hamas in Lebanon. So, to cut right to the chase, what do you think could be the purpose of this meeting? Why is the Cuban ambassador meeting with a representative of such high standing for Hamas in Lebanon?
Congresswoman, it doesn't look good to me. I can't imagine what legitimate purpose there would be in meeting with a terrorist organization's representative. So
I agree with you that I'm sure that nothing good is coming out of this meeting. The only thing we could think of is that maybe the Cuban regime is inviting some Hamas operatives to come to Havana, Havana is only 90 miles away from my house, meaning my community, the city of Miami. Do you have any info about that?
I do not personally, but I'd be happy to look into it and come back to you on it.
Please do. Cuba is in the list of countries that sponsor terrorism. And we know that the Biden administration has been thinking, or some of the representatives of the Biden administration they have been within the State Department. They have been talking about the possibility of removing Cuba from that list of states that sponsor terrorism. Could you send the message to your colleagues that maybe after something like this, Cuba should remain on that list?
I'd be happy to take that back.
And what do you think about that?
Quite frankly, I have not been following this issue in terms of Cuba, so I don't have an opinion on, but I'd be happy to take this back to my colleagues.
All right. Now let's go to Colombia. Let me go to the other one. Petro, the president of Colombia, has been, throughout his time in office, he has been talking about Hamas, and one of the comments, and I'm just being pretty rigorous, he compared the Jews to the Nazis at one point. A few days ago, President Petro compared Gaza to Auschwitz. A few weeks ago, he recalled the Colombian ambassador in Israel. So the question is, how does the State Department categorize, interprets these comments, actions from the Colombian president?
Well, I can speak to it here in the sense that this is obviously an appalling set of comparisons. Misusing the misusing the notion of the Holocaust to compare it to what is going on right now is really beyond the pale.
You know, the State Department has treated the president of Colombia with a lot of deference, and so has the White House. So I just want to hear your comments and your opinions. What would you be sending back? What message would you be sending back to the State Department, to the rest of the State Department, and to the White House about the actions and the words of the actual president of Colombia?
Well, this is the first I've been made aware of this, Congresswoman, and I am happy to take this back.
But, you know, I think that the State Department should be, and someone in your position should be aware and knowledgeable of what's happening in our backyard.
Well, you know, for better or worse, I have a remit in the Middle East that keeps me busy 24/7. So it's been a little bit difficult, especially these days, to look beyond to the kind of dialogue or the kind
And
of
I understand
discourse.
that your job is very big, but I'm very happy that I have brought to your attention the fact that these two countries that are very close to us in our hemisphere are behaving or acting this way or speaking this way. Now, that's the last question. How concerning is it to the State Department that these two governments, Cuba and Colombia, in our backyard, 90 miles away from Miami, specifically the Cuban government is inviting, I'm sure inviting Hamas operatives to our hemisphere? How concerning?
I would certainly be concerned if they were inviting Hamas operatives to our hemisphere, and that's certainly something we'll look into it.
And I would like for you very much to get back to us and tell us if you have any type of information, if any Hamas personnel or combatants have crossed to this hemisphere, meaning invited to Havana or to more to Havana than probably any other country. Could I count on that?
You can count on that.
Thank you, madam. I yield back.
Lady yields. Chair recognizes Ms. Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Meeks, and thank you to our witnesses today. On October 7th, we woke in horror to Hamas's brutal and despicable terror attacks as they fired rockets at innocent civilians, stormed the border and invaded Israel, going house to house, murdering babies, executing parents in front of their children, massacring 260 young people at a music festival, and murdering more than 1,400 innocent people on one terrible day. In addition, Hamas took more than 240 innocent civilians hostage, including elderly women, young children, and babies. I have beside me pictures of some of these men, women, and children. I would like to ask everyone to look at their faces. Each one of them is a precious individual who has family members who love them and are desperate to know if they are safe and desperate for their return. I have met with the families of hostages for the past 3 weeks. People like the Siegel family from North Carolina, whose relatives Keith and Aviva Siegel were kidnapped from Kibbutz Kfar Aza. People like Gili Rahman, whose sister Yarden handed her 3-year-old daughter Geffen to her husband Alon while they were trying to escape because he could run faster while she sacrificed herself to save her daughter. And Abigail Moore Edan, who became an orphan on October 7th when her parents were killed in front of her before she was taken hostage alone. Just like the stories of the Holocaust survivors, the story of every hostage is unique and heartbreaking. I have given these families my word that I would continue to tell their stories and push the administration to do everything they can to secure their release. So I know Assistant Secretary Leaf and Deputy Assistant Secretary Stroll, you can give them hope that we will spare no effort to secure their release. I believe you've said that before today. I just want to ask you that question again.
Of course, you absolutely have the commitment of this administration to do everything in its power to see the release of those hostages.
It is one of the reasons why the Department of Defense immediately sent advisors to support efforts to secure the release of the hostages.
Thank you so much. And Assistant Secretary Leaf, we know that the International Committee of the Red Cross has not been let in to see the hostages, to make sure that they are alive, and to be able to give word to their families. What are the barriers to allowing the Red Cross to get in to see the hostages?
One word, Hamas.
So Hamas is preventing the International Red Cross from going in to see the hostages and give their families some hope that those people are still alive. And in fact, the only reason we know some of them are alive because of the comments of the 4 hostages who have been released and 1 who has been saved by Israeli soldiers. Is that correct?
Well, there is also the really deplorable fact that Hamas has put some of the hostages on video and televised that. So yeah, it is really a dreadful situation for the families and for their loved ones. By all rights, by the laws, international humanitarian law, Hamas should allow the ICRC to have access to those hostages.
And what information can you share with us in this setting about what the U.S. is doing to get our partners and allies in the region to demand and put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages?
So, as I indicated earlier, we have 2 stalwart partners, Qatar and Egypt, who are working methodically, relentlessly at this issue. They have, the problem is who they're dealing with. But they are exercising every bit of their influence and their energy to try to break the impasse on the hostages.
And Assistant Secretary Leaf, in your opinion, are you satisfied with the actions that Turkey, a NATO ally, and Qatar, a major non-NATO ally, have taken so far to get Hamas to give up American citizens?
I have not really seen Turkey engaged in this effort. If they are, I'm just not witting to it. But I know, having talked just very regularly with the Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, that he is personally engaged in the of Qatar. He's personally engaged in the effort. He has a large team working it 24/7.
Thank you. My time is expiring. I yield back.
Jolie yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Huizenga.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I'm gonna take that as a jumping off point. Both the ICRC as well as Qatar and the situation there. First, on the ICRC, is the ICRC doing enough? There is some question. It's real commitment, and all you have to do is look at some of the previous years and decades. ICRC seems to have been pretty hard on Israel over the years, and some have suggested that the ICRC is not doing enough to pursue this because of that relationship or sort of bad blood with Israel. You care to comment on that?
Congressman, I have no reason to think the ICRC is not doing enough on this. And I would just add that, in fact, ICRC staff have been in the direct line of fire in Gaza doing a really critical piece of work, which is escorting ambulances with wounded from Gaza to Rafah. This has been a condition that Hamas has placed on the exit of foreign nationals, including our own American citizens, and ICRC stepped up to that task to ensure that they got there and that our citizens could get out.
Okay. And we can explore that more potentially later. Turning to Qatar and the sort of the reports of Hamas leaders living a pretty lavish lifestyle in the country. Obviously, we have a very important relationship with Qatar, and they host thousands of our troops. Central Command, regional Central Command is there. What sort of conversations has the administration had with Qatar to kick out Hamas terrorists currently residing in the country, and really making sure that they are ensuring that they're not providing Hamas with any of the means to fund this again?
Yeah, you make an interesting point, and it really goes to this question of what Hamas thinks it's representing or doing. Its leaders do live in the lap of luxury overseas, quite in contrast to the Palestinians in Gaza over whom they rule. To your question, at this point, Qatar, at our request, Israel's request, is working assiduously on the issue of hostage release. But it's fair to say that we've been clear with all of our partners and countries around the world that it will not be back to business as usual going forward.
Okay. I actually happen to also serve on the Financial Services Committee and chair the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee. And just last week we had a hearing on terrorism financing and what was going on. And my colleague, Mr. Hill, myself, Mr. Barr, have all had amendments today on some of the appropriations bills, looking at how we choke off that terrorism funding. And I guess I want to make sure that it's not just Iran that we're looking at, that there are other countries and in that neighborhood. Obviously, Qatar has I've seen reports have provided over $1 billion in various aid over the last decade. Lots of concern about fungibility that we have. So, how is the administration ensuring that assistance entering Gaza doesn't have sort of this dual purpose, dual use purpose, whether it could be cash, which is very, very fungible, but it could be fuel, it could be medicine and supplies that while the West intends, or the Red Cross or anybody else intends for that to be going to civilians, could be easily diverted.
At this point, what is going into Gaza, the humanitarian assistance is being very carefully vetted as it goes through multiple sort of checks. This is part of what is slowed down, frankly, the stream of assistance going in. I take your point on the larger question of financing, and believe me when I say that sort of a counter-Hamas effort globally will be a top priority going forward.
I've got just a couple of seconds left. We know about Iran's oil sales to the tune, some reports of $80 billion this past year. We also know that they are selling electricity to Iraq. I have had a letter to Secretary Blinken with myself and Blaine Lukemeyer, who heads up the Terrorism Finance Subcommittee for Financial Services, asking some very specific questions. Are you aware of this letter?
I'm not. I'll certainly look for it.
We will send it to you because this is very important that we look at this. This notion that Iraq has the ability, and this administration changed policy on this without coming to Congress. They are now converting those into euros. Euros are far more fungible than Iraqi dinari. Nobody's going to be buying and selling goods and services in that. They are certainly in euros, and we're going to continue to push on this, Mr. Chairman. And I know my time is up, but I appreciate the responsiveness, and we're going to be following up with you on some of those issues. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Time has expired. Chair recognizes Ms. Dean.
Thank you, Chairman McCall and Ranking Member Meeks, for this important hearing. I thank both of you women for testifying today. More important, I thank you for your service and your clarity of purpose at this extraordinarily challenging time. As all of us have said, it's been just a little more than a month since the grotesque, brutal slaughter of more than 1,400 Israelis. As a mom and a grandmom, the worst, the children, the babies, but men, women, and children butchered, slaughtered, raped. More than 200 hostages, 240 plus, apparently. We all, I hope, unequivocally condemn the October 7th attack by Hamas, a terrorist organization. I condemn Hamas. I know Israel has the right, the responsibility to respond and to dismantle Hamas terrorism. We have to ensure the safe return of the hostages, and I was appreciative of Representative Manning's line of questions. Do you have any at all possible update on the hostages at this moment?
I wouldn't want to jeopardize the efforts that are underway by commenting on it publicly.
I appreciate that, and I just felt I had to ask, but I understand that sensitivity. At the same time, we have to do everything to make sure to protect innocent civilian lives on both sides of the fence. And so I decry the loss of life, the loss of innocent civilian life in Gaza. I've called on the administration to do everything in their power, and I'm very proud of the President as well as the Secretary of State for the extraordinary work they're doing. But we must seek, Israel must seek a humanitarian pause for all kinds of reasons, to get the hostages out and to make sure that folks are taken care of as best as possible in these extraordinarily difficult situations. There are moral choices in wars. It is not just you have a right to be at war. There are moral choices, and I want the administration to continue to lift up innocent life. Dead babies on either side of the fence are unacceptable to me, at least. We've talked a lot about Gaza. I wonder if I could switch a little bit to the West Bank. I've been to Israel, I've been to the West Bank, I've been to Gaza. Ambassador Leaf, you expressed concern about the stability of the West Bank. I'm concerned too. You note the urgency of reining in extremist settler violence. I am concerned about that too, which I quote, which has led to the displacement of at least 828 Palestinians from their homes and 15 different communities in the West Bank since October 7th. You point out that even before the start of the latest crisis, there were settler violence attacks day after day, multiple attacks in a single day, 1,400 incidents from January to October of this year. Ambassador, how are you and Secretary Blinken and the administration engaging with Israel, specifically the coalition administration, to prevent further settler violence? When I was on the ground there, the meeting, this was prior to October 7th, the meeting when we asked about settler violence was shut down. What are you doing?
This has been a topic of discussion between us and the Israeli government for months, literally. What has really accelerated our efforts has been the phenomenal, really terrible 500% increase in these attacks, sometimes several dozen a day. They're also more violent, beatings and destruction of property. Some Palestinians have been killed by settlers.
Yes.
And
quite a few.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And destruction of property that is aimed really at wholly damaging, destroying the economy, the livelihoods of these communities. So we have been relentlessly on this issue, and I would say there has been a belated but welcome sort of awakening to the alarming trend lines, awakening in the senior leaders among the senior leaders of the coalition. And they have committed to us to pursue, to deter, to prevent these activities, and to bring to accountability those who engage in them, whether they are members of the armed forces, the IDF, or settlers themselves. Yeah. And so, as Secretary Blinken said several days ago when he had this engagement with the government, he heard the right thing, but we're going to follow this in detail. And we want to see accountability.
Okay, and I apologize, my time has expired, but I'm going to offer in writing some questions for you as well. So I thank you both very much. I yield back.